You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. And be sure to smash that like button. LSU spring football kicks off today, Tuesday. In the meantime, Tigers also looking ahead to their future. Shea Dixon on 3, the Bengal Tiger, always going to join us here on Tuesday. Shady, how are you, man?
I'm doing well. How are you, Matt?
Man, I'm doing good. Hey, before we get into the recruiting, just with spring kicking off, I know everybody kind of does their spring storylines. What's maybe the one or two biggest things that you're most interested to see coming out of these 15 spring practices?
I would probably put the defensive staff changes at number one, if not at 1A or B, because yes, they added 6 portal players, and they signed some high school guys, but you didn't get a completely new roster from a year ago on defense. But you did get new coaches, and how far can they bring this group along in the offseason, I think, is something that's going to be notable when looking at how high, LSU finished 113 or 15 in total defense a year ago, something like that. How high can you climb to get back to what the standard is in just 1 year, in one off season and in one season? So I would put them, the 5 new coaches, up there is kind of what I want to keep an eye on. And then right there with it, the defensive personnel. I mean, I couldn't tell you who's going to end up starting at corner, both corner spots. I get kind of have a feel for safety, but what's happening at the defensive line, and then maybe more specifically at D tackle. And we'll get a look at guys like Sean Washington, their JUCO signee, who they hope can give them some reps right away this year. But I would say that coaching, and then defensively, the DB corner position, and then interior of defensive line. And after that, it'd probably be, what do these new receivers look like? Xavier Thomas and C.J. Daniels coming out of Liberty, and Thomas out of Mississippi State. Those are your new additions out of the portal who are expected to be leaned on, to soften the blow in some way of losing 2 first-rounders.
Shea, what does it say that you didn't mention losing the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback? Is it? I guess my question is, you know what I mean? Like, is it that defense is that big of a thing, or is it that we're just really comfortable that Nuss is the guy, and we're just expecting he's going to take the baton and run?
Yeah, it's either I'm dumb or I'm thinking of it in this light here. It's the same thing we all had to preach, and LSU fans understood after 2019, right? Like, you're not going to be number one again in offense. Now, I think that with Joe Sloan, Cortez Hankton, Frank, Brad Davis, and then obviously the addition of Nagel, you kept some real stability there, and you'll carry on with an OC and play callers who have worked with Nussmeier. We talked with Nussmeier this week about that, and he said that was massive. Nothing changes for him. He keeps on rolling now, and I think the identity of any really elite offense is usually your offensive line, and they're very good there. They return a lot of starters, and they'll always have receivers, and I think that they do. I think there'll be guys like Kyron or Chris Hilton or someone in that returning group who really are multiple, who stand up and surprise some folks, and you'll have your running backs break through. So, here's how I think of that, Matt. If they finished 1, the difference between 1 and maybe staying in the top 30, and the difference between being the 115th best defense or worst defense and maybe being in the 50s or 60s, I think the latter is the bigger talking point. That would be the more important jump to have.
He's on Twitter at Shea Dixon, always good enough to join us for a couple of minutes here. And it's a giant look ahead for the future as well, not just for the 2024 team, but beyond. Big junior day this weekend. Shea, can you kind of break down what that means?
Yeah, so this will be their second big junior day. They had one in January, but February was a dead period, meaning kids couldn't visit campuses, recruits, and nor could coaches go on the road. That ended this week, and then spring practices kind of simultaneously begin. So they'll have guys in for practice on Friday. That will kind of blend right into Saturday's big junior day, so a lot of guys will be here for a couple of days. And right now, looking up and down the list, Matt, yes, they have the number 1 recruiting class in America, but I think we've got a little more than 40 guys on our who have confirmed with us that they'll be here this weekend, and more than 30 of them are 4 and 5 stars that are top 300 prospects and are uncommitted. They're not committed to LSU. So when you talk about can the rich get richer here, yes, and it's weekends like this where you're bringing in guys from Texas, Florida, Mississippi, Georgia, Bama, a lot of your out-of-state targets after the January one was kind of focused on in-state guys, and there'll be Louisiana guys there this weekend, but there's so many out-of-state targets coming in. I think this is one of those weekends where we look back and you say, hey, look, they ended up getting a couple of commitments out of guys who decided, hey, right out of the dead period, the first place I'm going is LSU.
Shea, first of all, I want to come back to that in a second, but first, Bryce Underwood's going to be on campus this weekend, correct? What's the significance of getting him on campus for an event like this?
It doesn't get any bigger than getting the number one overall prospect in the country on campus. And he's been committed to LSU since January. He has publicly maintained that he's not talking with other schools. He's not going to visit other schools. Has no plans to do any of that. And right now he's focused on the transition from being at Belleville, where they've played for 3 straight state titles. He's won 2. He'll go into his senior year trying to win another, and then he'll graduate and be at LSU as a midterm guy. So he's already within a year of being on campus. So I think he's starting to really lock in on, all right, I'm bought in, I'm going to LSU, who all is going to be there with me? And they've got a great start with the number 1 class. But when you bring him down on a weekend like this, and I'll note he'll be back for the spring game, so you get him down twice in the span of about a month, a little more than a month. But he's just that ability to have that extra recruiter there, right? Like when you've got a 5-star like that, number 1 overall player on campus, and you've got your 5-star receiver in DeCorian Moore coming this weekend, and your 5-star running back in Harlem Berry, and kind of your cornerstone piece and recruiter in a 4-star linebacker in Keelan Moses here at U-High. All those guys and then many more will be here. So when you talk about the uncommitted guys still out there, certainly guys who play receiver or play on the offensive side, it's notable. I think that they see it and they say, okay, I want to be a part of this. I better grab my spot.
There's 9 commits right now, Shea. You mentioned some of the uncommitted guys. You said there might be a possibility for some commits to pop. Do we know names or positions or guys that could maybe lean toward making a decision this weekend or after?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you 2. I'll give you 1 in-state, 1 and outside the state. The in-state guy everybody's watching is James Simon. Coming out of Calvary Baptist, made it all the way to the Dome, was phenomenal this year as a top 10 running back in the country. And right now, LSU's home to 3 of the top 11 running backs in the country. JT Lindsay out of Alexandria checked in at number 11 in our recent updated rankings last week. But Simon firmly knocking on the door of top 100 and is a top 10 running back, and they want him badly. Frank Wilson's been going for this Harlem Berry, James Simon 1-2 punch, and Simon will be there this weekend with all those guys I just mentioned, including Berry on the offensive side. And when you look up and down the list of guys they've offered in the state, there's not another player on offense that they've offered who isn't committed to LSU right now. So he sort of will always be on that list of could he pop until he does shut things down. And then outside the state, over in Mobile, in Alabama, Micah DeBose, an offensive lineman, 4-star, visited LSU just before the dead period started, so back at the end of January. And that was a few weeks removed from when he had been committed to Georgia and backed off it and said, hey, look, I kind of want to look around again. Auburn, Hugh Freeze really turned up the heat on him, but he ends up visiting LSU there at the end of January, and now the dead period ends and the first visit weekend's up, and DeBose is not going to Auburn. Instead, he's going over to LSU again. So I think everyone's kind of got an eye on him to, hey, look, can they get another top 100 player on board on the offensive line? They've got one already in Devin Harper. Now with Micah DeBose coming out of Alabama, does he visit and potentially commit? So James Simon doesn't have a date really set. If I'm putting odds on it, I would probably think maybe the likelihood of one of the 2 popping, I would lean DeBose.
He is Shea Dixon on 3, the Bengal Tiger, on Twitter at Shea Dixon. Big junior day this weekend for the Tigers. Maybe a couple of commits could come up at Tigers with the number 1 class in the country for 2025. Shea, we appreciate it as always, man. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, let's recap it next week.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.